Hey besties and bosses, how are you all doing? I'm just gonna pull this up in my group since I know sometimes this doesn't work, but I think we are live. How's everyone's weekend? How's everyone's week going? I realized today, as we scheduled, for once, I am actually on top of when holidays and things are coming. And in the US, we have the 4th of July next week. So next Tuesday, we will not have our live stream and we'll pick it up again the week afterwards. This Tuesday, I'm very excited for our conversation. We're going to be talking about the mindset that supports attraction, booking clients, and making money. And it's a conversation we started on the podcast, and I want to go into a little bit deeper because I have some thoughts to speak to this after over 7 years of business experience and being in a season in business. I was joking in the email to this where everyone's talking about their eras in business. Did that come from Taylor Swift? I'm like 80 years old and don't know like what the cool kids are doing. But I think this means like I'm in my fun, useful era, and I want to speak about that really specifically because I think there's a lot of confusion around that. I think that can sound very, very fluffy. And not only is there research and science behind this, but there's some practicality and some nuances I want to speak to and really speak to how this applies to, yes, how you feel in business, but also really how this impacts your attraction and your results. Before we dig in, announcements and fun things. And if you're live, say hi. I always love to know who's here. Giveaways, fun stuff. First, giveaway, which is not for this live, but I'm giving away access to everyone who wants it to my 6-week sales course, Sell Out Without Feeling Like a Sellout. It is a full 6-week sales course. It walks you through the clarity, mindset, strategy, and action of creating a sales process that allows you to get visible, bring in those right fit leads, and turn those right fit leads into right fit clients who love to pay you. So you're doing so in a way that is heart-centered, that is without the ick, without the manipulation, but is very much based in both the mindset and the strategy that will allow you to, bring in clients, but also keep them on the back end. This is the process I use in my business. It's what I support clients through. It's walking you through a framework and different sales perspectives and strategies. So this isn't one size fits all, but this is what you can then apply to your business to make work for whatever it is you're selling. You could easily sell this if I believed in the course model in a different way. I don't. Usually we offer it for $99 because I want it to be very accessible to you, but I want you to have some skin in the game. But I'm giving it away for free until Friday. So this Friday the 30th, you can get free access. I want this to be accessible to everyone. Sales is so important in your business. It is a skill everyone can learn. I know I used to be scared of sales. I used to think it was like some secret, and there's no secret here, but there are some practical thought processes and strategy that can be very, very beneficial for you to help you take up more space and to help you bring in more of those right fit clients and make more money in your business. It is an important skill set as a business owner, as a CEO. So please take me up on that. I'll make sure after the live I drop the link here. There's definitely a link at the top of the group, and we'll be floating around the Facebook group. You can snag that until the 30th of this month, and then it will turn back into a paid course. So if you hear this afterwards, you can still snag that. It will only be $99, but it will be going back to a paid course then. Other fun giveaway is we like to do giveaways on the lives. If you join me live, I'd love to encourage you to hang out with me live. Selfishly, I like to get to hang out with you, and it's always fun for me to hear your questions and to have this be a conversation. I don't love talking at you. I'm a coach. I'm used to listening to my clients and reflecting back to them and really making it client focused, not me jabbering on. So I love to encourage you to be here live. It makes for, I think, a more powerful conversation for everyone. So if you're live today, comment, say hi, drop me an emoji, and we will pick one person to win a free copy to my self-study course. Which one are we giving away? We're giving away Unlock Your Success. This walks through the 5 most common mindset block entrepreneurs, creatives, coaches get locked up in, and gives you some tools to help you get unstuck, to unlock your success, to move through some of those, create that awareness, but also those tools to move through those blocks. So give away one copy of that today. Again, all you got to do is leave me a comment, and if you already have the program or you don't want the course and you win, we can gift it to someone else. All right, so let's dive into our topic today. And my internet is being really funky, so hopefully I do not lose you. I don't know why it's being funky. The weather seems like it is normal, but I'm just pulling back up my notes here. Everything just seemed to have crashed while I was talking to you. Here we go. So what I wanted to talk about today, what I put in the email here, I think it's really interesting. I was thinking about this and reflecting the other day in my journaling, how I'm really celebrating this season, this era in my business and in my life. And I think it would be very easy to assume that's because I've been fully booked for 4.5 years, or because I'm making multi six figures, or we make reoccurring multi 5 figure cash months, or because I work with the best clients in the world, which I think I do, or because I'm happily married, which I am. But I was thinking about, the things I'm really celebrating right now. And I'm so grateful for all of those things. Do not hear this the wrong way. All of those things I am so, so, so grateful for. And I worked very intentionally to create those things in my life. And what I'm celebrating the most is how content and how easeful I feel in my life and in my business, and how I feel my my business is everything I've ever wanted, and it feels so enjoyable to show up for, to run, to market, and how my personal life is very much a non-traditional life by design and feels so juicy to show up for. And I think we sometimes forget about that in our space. I think sometimes we get very metric focused, and that is the language of business. Metrics, both monetary and not, are obviously important. I'm here for that, and that obviously supports me. And I think it would be very easy to have a conversation to only celebrate the metrics and to just always be chasing the next metric. And I think a metric we don't always talk about is how easeful and joyful and content we feel. And I want to be a reflection of that, because I did not always feel that way in my life, and definitely did not always feel that way in my business. And I also want to speak to how not only is that a result and a byproduct that you get to celebrate, and something I celebrate, something my clients celebrate. It's so fun for me to celebrate. I have a client who's on track for $1 million this year for going from 0 to $1 million. I have clients who are celebrating multi six figures for the first time this year. And what's so fascinating when I'm celebrating with them is how they're usually at that point, of course, they're grateful for the money, but they're often usually celebrating more the way they feel and how content and how easeful they feel in business and in their personal life. And that is also a result they're celebrating. And this is the conversation we're going to have today. That is also a mindset and strategy that has helped them to create those results. And that's what I want to dig into a little bit more, because I know this sounds fluffy, but I promise it's not fluffy. And this is something I had to really drill into at the start of my business that was very, very challenging for me, that I had a lot of resistance around, which is why I want to bring it here. Because if you're a high achiever, if you're anything like me, if you're anything like my clients, if you're wired similarly, I think the conversation we're having today is pretty much the one where you're like, yeah, I'm going to bounce off of this. Tell me the way to hustle to get some money, and then I'll be content on the other side. I don't even understand what you're talking about, Kim. And I really want to have a bit more of a conversation around how this doesn't only need to be something you're running towards that's in the future, that gets to be the thing you celebrate when you book the clients, when you make the money, when you have the booked out business, when you have the 6-figure launch. I want to help paint the picture and help connect the dots for how having more fun and having more enjoyment and having more ease now can be both a mindset and strategy that helps you to create attraction, that helps you to create clients, that helps you to create money, and that isn't a logical leap. And we're not talking about this through the lens of if you're just super happy and in a high vibe, then you're going to have money land into your lap. I am here for some manifesting. I love me some manifesting. I've manifested some cool ass shit in my business and life. I believe you and I are always manifesting, and I very, very much subscribe to practical manifestation, which blends the woo and blends the science of your brain and the subconscious mind. And if you believe in universe energy, God, right, connects those pieces and ties that into the very practical ways in which that changes your focus and changes the way in which you're showing up and taking action. And that's more about what we want to talk about today. So no one is jumping off and thinking oh my gosh, Kim, this is just doesn't even make sense. So as we're talking through this, comments, questions, reflections, throw them at me. A couple things I want to dig into, big picture. I want to talk about the difference between the belief that you have to work hard to make money versus doing hard things in your business to make money, and how that gets very confusing. I want to talk about the truth about easy in business and really leaning into the path of least resistance for results. I'm going to talk about the biggest shift I've made to go from making $800 a month to making consistent 30 to 40K cash months from a one-on-one only model with a very great profit margin without running ads we've been doing that for years and years now. This isn't I did that 1 month. And then we're going to talk about, I'm just seeing here because I've got a lot I want to dive into, what I put in the promises here. the money and success block that comes up for high achievers and how I support my clients to shift through this. Let's actually start first, because that's where we started this conversation with, and just say hi. If you're live, you'll get entered to win our giveaway. Let's start first with the number one mindset shift I had to make to go from making $800 a month to getting fully booked, to that first 10K month, to that first 20K month, to consistent revenue of multi-5-figure cash months. And I want to share this first because I want to be evidence for this, because I will tell you 100%. And we talked about this in a podcast a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to be mindful not to regurgitate too much of the science there. And I'll link to that podcast episode after for those of you who want to hear a little bit more on the science, like research side of this and the question you could unpack. And I'm going to cover this from a slightly different lens. But I can tell you right now, Kim, who was making $800 a month, was working far more and much, much harder than Kim today, who is making reoccurring multi-5-figure cash months. And I also want to explain a couple things around that. First and foremost, I want to paint a normalization picture that part of the reason I was working harder is that it felt, well, two things here. Part of the reason I was working harder is because I really, really, really had a very strong mindset that hard work equals result. Hard work equals money. And if you want something, the harder you work, the more likely you are to have that. I think society teaches this. I think different industries teach this. I think there's also a kernel of truth in that statement, in that comments are popping up again, and I'm not seeing them. So let me find this in the group. Let me find myself live, and then I can see your comments. This is so weird, y'all. This happened last week as well. And of course, I can't see myself live. I'm going to keep riffing while I scroll, but I want to see your comments, especially if you have questions. Okay, here we go. So now I can see your, Shari says, co-working within live stream. Hello, hi. Thank you for being here. Okay, now I can see them. I've got us in two places. Okay, where was I talking about? Oh, so I think society teaches this. I think well-meant teachers teach this. I think we've had this modeled in many ways. I think there is also an absolute truth that any result requires some type of work and effort, right? We put in an effort and we get a result on the other side. And if you, to a certain degree, if you work hard, the harder, like there's a very logical element to this. The harder you work, then logic would say the bigger the result on the other side. Except for there's a point of diminishing returns, and there is a ceiling in which that creates that doesn't really serve us in business. And I think this can be very confusing if we have been raised with that mentality. And so again, I want to normalize, of course, it takes work to create a result, right? If I want to get super fit and in shape, I can't just think about it and daydream about it and manifest my best six-pack abs and like high vibe myself to that. And I'm not hating on that school of thought, but I just think there's a lot of nuance that's missed there. Of course, I have to show up and do the workout and eat in the way that supports those results. And even there's going to be a point of diminishing returns, where if I just have the mentality of work hard gets results, work harder gets even better results, that is going to lead to hurting my body, to burning out, to having an eating disorder, to having a fitness disorder, right? Like there's a point of diminishing returns. And so there's actually a fallacy to the belief in terms of, if you want bigger results, just work harder. There's literally a cap and a ceiling on that. When we think about scaling in the traditional sense, so much of that is to support you to work smarter, not harder, so that you're showing up to get more results without having to put in more and more effort. And I think that is where, when we look at business and showing up like a CEO and thinking like a CEO, we really want to think about how can we leverage time, how can we leverage effort, how can we leverage, of course, work, but it doesn't always have to be by you, and it doesn't always have to be harder and harder, so that you can get increased results without increasing the amount of effort. Hopefully this is tracking here. But I think, again, because this is just such a common narrative in so many different places, and because there is a kernel of truth and a kernel of logic within this, I think this can be very challenging for our brains to latch onto. And especially then if you add on layers of fear and high achievement and what gets wrapped up around oftentimes a personality or mindset around that. If we add in layers of a trauma response, which I don't want to like even try to unpack on a live stream like this, but just adding in the nuances that can feed into a mindset of, if I want results, the way to get that is to work harder and harder and harder, and working harder equals more results. We can see why so many of us have this belief set. And I absolutely had this as like the number one thing I probably prided myself on when I started my business. And again, just to really normalize this, and there was a degree of truth to it, right? Like my work ethic and my ability to work hard did get me a certain level of success. It did get me a certain level of success in the entertainment world, in entertainment industry, meaning film and television. I had one of my VAs say, be very mindful that doesn't sound like entertainment in terms of like, I don't know, like escorts or strippers or something like that. Not judging if anyone is in that world, but we're talking film, television when I say entertainment world. It absolutely, like when I was waiting tables, like there was an element of that. When I started my business, there was an element of my like willingness to have a little healthy hustle absolutely built this business, and it gave me a ceiling and a cap on the results I could get. And that mentality is what actually turned out to be, I don't want to say a saboteur, because I want to be mindful of how I use that as well, but it actually really prevented me from what allowed me to create bigger results in my business. And one of the biggest shifts in my personal mindset, and that I see through clients, that allows them to take the kernel of truth that is, yes, it takes effort, it takes work, it takes showing up by you or a team member or an automation, right? It takes an effort, an output to create the input back in your business. To take that truth and to marry it to what blows up those types of results is really finding the way to lean into what is the easeful, joyful, fun way to show up. And that is the mindset that I have seen make the biggest difference for myself and for my clients. And when I look at what shifted me from my $800 a month to, I think I might have said 800K earlier, $800, not 800K, would be a very different dollar shift, but $800 a month to my first 10K month. And then I very quickly jumped from my first 10K to my first 24K month and kind of grew from that to 30, 40, kind of like staying in that range. The biggest shift, and I share this on the podcast, but I want to share it again through a different lens, was I was quite literally challenged by my coach to lean into having more fun and to play with having more fun and to bring more levity and fun to my strategy and to play with that mindset and energy, and essentially to not to take the mindset of working so hard, and to see what that did to my results, to use it as an experiment. And I had so much fucking resistance to that because nothing in my logical brain understood how, like, that sounded so fucking fluffy to me. And I'm sharing this because I know there's other people who think this, so I hope this is helpful to hear, like, all the resistance around that. But I was also like, I trust my coach, and what I'm doing is only working to a certain degree. Might as well try an experiment for a week here. And it was just really, really fascinating to both witness the resistance and how much I needed to unpack around that, and that I still have to at every level because I am wired this way, and to reshift that and to reshift my association with what it means to work and what is enjoyable work versus, in air quotes, hard work or pushing or hustling, and what that did for my results. And just so fascinating to see how quickly things shifted because of that mindset shift, and how that shifted the way I was approaching the way in which I showed up to do very similar strategy and actions. And that is what I want to offer here, as there really is a big difference between you have to work hard for money versus doing hard things in business to make money. I would actually say leaning into having more fun and play in my business, whenever that was. I've been booked out for about 4.5 years probably. So that was probably about 5 years ago that I was playing with that. That was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do, which sounds so funny, right? That is a hard thing I had to do, working through a lot of, because there was just so much wrapped up for me mindset-wise in terms of why I was really clinging on to hard work equals money in terms of safety and security and control. And we're not going to unpack all of that here, but just for anyone who is leaning into that, to notice there's a reason we choose certain behaviors, aside from maybe being taught that and seeing the logical reasons for that. There can be other reasons we choose thoughts and behaviors because of how they are serving for us, whether protectively or because they serve our identity, but those can be very serving. So it can actually be quite challenging to lean into something that on the surface sounds light and fun and playful because of what we're needing to let go of to lean into that. And that can feel very hard, but that is very different from hard work or the mentality that you always have to work harder and harder and harder to make more money or to get big results. I'm hoping this is tracking the way or making sense the way I'm describing this. If anyone has questions, again, like throw them at me. And what I want to offer here, and what really helped my brain, because I find sometimes understanding when something feels a little lighter, and I think it's just fascinating how our brains, this is such a fascinating thing. I find it so interesting how when something feels light and positive and easeful, how sometimes our brains can have resistance and need more evidence around them, or at least for some of us. I think for those of us who have a story or an ingrained belief or wiring around the hard work equals results in business, that kind of piece there, how it's almost like we don't want to believe that. It seems like too good to be true, and we like need the evidence. Whereas something that's like in air quotes negative or harder, we don't need the same evidence. We're like, yeah, you know, that totally makes sense. So my brain at the time really needed something concrete because I just couldn't otherwise lean into things aside from the experiment and just trying that. So the experiment, I got some data that gave me something, but I had to go down the research rabbit hole, and I share this on the podcast again, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, so we're not regurgitating what I just shared. But I think what's really fascinating to understand is that there is a whole body of research, there is a whole body of psychology dedicated to the research of play and the benefits of play on your brain. And play meaning quite literally what you think of as play in terms of what children do, playing, and that levity, and which is the opposite of hard work, right? Play is not hard work. Play is a very different form. It's doing something basically without a goal in mind, and how powerful that is for creative thinking outside of the box, problem solving, for creating connections. I mean, the list goes on and on in terms of the benefit and also what it's doing for your mind. And when we go back to, when we think about business and we think about what actually drives results in business, again, we just want to go to like more hard work equals results. And yes, output does equal results. Your business does need you to show up or someone to show up. Your business does need certain things to generate a result. I'm having my fun era, my most peaceful, content era in my business and life. And I still work a full week. I still show up to market. I am here right now. I show up for my clients, right? I'm still doing work, but it does not feel like hard work. I think that's the nuance and difference there. So yes, obviously that is still needed. And the type of work, I think, and the way in which we're showing up for work is the difference maker. And when we think about everything, what we want as a CEO and what really generates results and what allows a business to thrive, it's all the benefits that play gives. Creative problem solving, innovation, being able to see things differently, connection, right? And then I think there's a slew of health benefits as well, but all of those qualities are quite literally what make up a CEO role and what's going to allow you to thrive. If we look at the Spanx of the world, if we look at the Apples of the world, if we look at, any large business that's very successful, and you look at the CEO that's running that, and you look at what their contribution is to the business, a lot of what we're seeing there, the things we're actually striving for that actually are connected to what generates the biggest results in your business, are the benefits that play, that levity, that fun bring you. And if we think about what we're doing with marketing and what we're doing with sales and what we're doing with creating clients and creating revenue in our business, I think most of this group is not so much wrapped up in this, but I think somewhere along the line, the online space as a whole has sort of lost the plot in terms of what that really entails and what that's really about. And I think everyone here we're on the same page, but at the end of the day, what is that about? It's about relationships. It's about connection. And I don't know about you, but when I have the choice of people I want to build a relationship with and have connection with, if I look at my personal relationships, I'm not looking for the person that it's like the hardest working person and the person who's like, I'm just going to work really, really hard on this relationship. And like, who is enjoyable to be around, who brings some levity, who can I have fun with, and of course, who can also be there for me in the challenging times where we're not saying that everything has to be like light and rainbows and unicorns, and like none of this is a bypassy conversation. I'm not saying that at all. But if we look at when you first have that first point of attraction for a relationship, and if we think about marketing, your marketing relationships first start with that first point of attraction to then build the relationship, to then bring in the depth, to then bring in the nuance, to then be there to like hold people through the ups and the downs. That first point of attraction, right? If I'm swiping on Tinder, or if I'm at the gym and I want to make a new gym buddy friend, like, let's just be so honest. What are we usually attracted to naturally? We're attracted to something that just feels a little lighter, and it doesn't have to be fun. I don't think I like come across in my branding as like Kim's like the most fun person and having parties and popping champagne all the time, but fun and playful in terms of levity, in terms of not grinding it out and miserable and hating your life or your business. That's really the lens I'm looking at this through, because I think fun can be a kind of funky word, and I think of this more as playful in terms of levity versus like depressed and not happy with what you're doing, or like grinding it out mentality or energy, right? That tends to be what attracts us to one another initially. And so I think it's so helpful to see, wait a second, all of these things that sound very, very fluffy, that those of us who are a little more wired or have been taught, have created the wiring through society's teachings and imprinting to believe that like being super serious and doing things super professionally in a buttoned up way, or grinding it out or working super hard is the only way to create results. I want to offer that I think there's actually equally as much, if not more, evidence that's really rooted in both research in terms of what makes us thrive, but in terms of the qualities that actually lead to what we're trying to do in business, which is create those attraction points, create and build relationships, and then be able to creatively think and innovate, and to have offers and be able to package them and to create something that is different from what everyone else is doing. And that, I think, is a nuance from you have to work hard to make money, versus sometimes you have to do hard things to make money, but really understanding what is actually the mechanism that allows you to show up in a way that creates attraction, that creates clients, that creates money, and really teasing that out and separating that out from that story of it has to be grinded out, it has to be work hard, work harder, work harder. If this isn't working, I'm just going to work harder. And yes, there's the whole work smarter, not harder, but I would even offer, what does work smarter, not harder mean? Yeah, sometimes it's having systems and processes and streamlining things. Here for that all day, every day. Every business needs that. And sometimes that also means literally the way to work smarter, not harder, is to look for where can you infuse the playfulness, the contentedness, like where can you bring that back? What are all the reasons you started your business in the first place? How can you bring that joy back into what you're doing? Because let's also be honest, if you have an option between who you're going to hire, who you're going to buy from, are you going to hire the person who is selling something because it's clear that they just love what they do so much and they cannot wait to show up to support you or to deliver their product? Or are you going to buy from the person who's like checking everything off a to-do list, and who looks like they haven't slept in a week, and who looks miserable, and who looks like they hate what they do, but they're just doing it because they have to, and if they just push a little bit harder, that like then they'll be able to make some money? And I'm being very dramatic here, but I mean, if we just think about this, we can, from another angle and from another lens, I think we can start to see how actually logical and practical allowing for some of that joy and levity in your business really can be. And I would say that is, it sounds so, I'm like so superlative to say like that was the one thing that blew up my business, because that's not at all the case. But that was absolutely a huge shift that took me from $800 a month to that first 10K month, because my strategy was exactly the same. I was doing the same things, and I say this so often, I'm working so much less hard today, and some of that's because I have a team and systems and processes, of course, but some of it's because I made a huge mindset shift and really changed the relationship up with what it means to work and what type of work I do and how that work generates results. And that shift dramatically, like, and of course, compound effect, I mean, I always want to be mindful to not say like, it was one thing and that one thing changed everything. And that one mindset shift did change quite a bit, because the way in which I was showing up to do the same work changed. The way in which I was relating to people online, having calls, doing work completely shifted. The way in which I felt completely shifted. And that, again, changes the point of attraction. It changes the way in which you're bringing clients. It changes even what you're talking about, or how you're showing up on a live stream, or how you're showing up in your content. And I think that is the piece that we sometimes forget about, especially when, all the other mindset stuff can be coming up. So that is the mindset shift I had to make. And I see this through clients. I will give this as, obviously not all my clients are exactly like me. Some clients have the opposite challenge, and they love playfulness and lightfulness is that word, so much that there's a resistance to showing up consistently. So we might have a different conversation. So if that's you, this is not an excuse to not show up, because remember we said at the beginning, your business still needs output to generate that input coming back to your business, right? There is still effort required in some form to create a result. It's how we're relating to that effort and how we're thinking about that effort and how we're leveraging that effort that I think makes a really big difference. And I think then going back to, you have to work hard to make money, I think what I would really play with instead, and what I would invite everyone to think about, is it's not so much you have to work hard and harder and harder and harder. So again, there's just a fallacy in that thinking. I think about this with a one-on-one model. I literally can only work hard to a certain degree before I literally give myself a ceiling and a cap of how much money I can make in my business or how many clients I can serve. I also know that there's such a fallacy in that thinking, because if I work myself to a point of burnout, there is a decrease in the quality of output, right? Like, I'm not going to either practically put out as much quality content and marketing, or I'm not going to be able to serve my clients very well. And so there's going to be a decrease in quality that actually will negatively impact the results I'm getting monetarily in my business. So I think, again, just want us to keep seeing what a false construct that is and how it doesn't actually even add up practically. And this is the piece we started touching on earlier, understanding that that is very, very different from being willing and understanding there might be hard things in business that you are asked to show up for so that you can make money, right? There's a big difference between working hard and grinding it out versus you can do hard things and showing up for hard things. It might feel very hard and challenging to let go of some of the hustle mentality, right? That is a hard thing to show up for. There are challenging conversations. Sometimes we have to work through discomfort. Sometimes the hardest and most challenging thing for you to show up for, practically speaking, will be some of the simplest, easiest work. And I think that's where, again, it can get very muddy and confusing. And I think separating those pieces out can be very useful. So the brain isn't creating the story of, I've got to work harder and harder. How can I just work harder? Because then you're focused on the wrong lever in your business to create results, instead of what is the maybe hard, challenging thing I can show up for to be able to create results. Because this is like the truth in business that or at least for all of us in the online space, most of what we're doing, I'm trying to think of how to say this in a way that comes across the way I mean it. Everyone here can do hard things, and all of us, I think, are doing impactful, important work, and we're doing it in different ways. And I think everyone here, for the most part, is a service-based business owner. And I think there are a lot of challenges that come with business and challenges that come with building your business at different stages. And if we just look at the actual work output, what we're doing itself is not the most challenging work that someone could be doing, right? If we just look at, if I just look at my day, what I had to do today, I posted some content, I served my clients, I had a follow-up call with someone, I'm hopping on live with you now, right? These are all pretty simple, not grinding it out, challenging things that I'm going to be done. I'm going to go to have a nice workout, right? And I think we can also make something feel harder than it is because we have the mentality of we're supposed to work hard to make money. And I think what we can do is then take something that, again, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. that can feel challenging, right? Because there are learning curves and it can feel very uncomfortable maybe to show up live for the first time or to sell or to hold space for someone going through something challenging. So that's not to diminish the depth of the work or the hard things you might be showing up for, but the tasks themselves, the work themselves for all of us is not necessarily a grinding it out type of work. And what I think can happen for so many of us who have the mentality of hard work equals success. And so if I want more success or I'm not getting the success I work, therefore I must work harder. I think what can happen is on some level we know, okay, showing up for a live stream, it might feel challenging. It might be hard because I have to overcome some personal hurdles. But the showing up for a live stream itself is a pretty simple, it's not a like hard efforting task. And so I think what we can do then is try to subconsciously make a task harder and harder and harder so that we can give ourselves that payoff of like, okay, I did the hard thing. I'm working so hard. So therefore I'm safe. So therefore I'll get success. So therefore I get approval. So therefore, is this tracking for everyone? So therefore I get the payoff that my brain thinks it needs. And that's where I really, again, want to just keep inviting us to tease these things out and to see them for what they are. And yes, you can do hard things. And yes, things in business might feel hard or might feel challenging, and being willing to do those challenging, uncomfortable, maybe is a better way to phrase it, things in business, I think can be so beneficial, but being really mindful not to collapse that to mean you have to grind it out or have it feel really, make it harder than it needs to be to get results, I think is where it can get very, very sticky for people. I think one of the biggest things I'm supporting clients with who are on the like wired for that kind of hard work equals results mentality, a lot of what we're doing on sessions is noticing all the places they're overcomplicating or making things harder than it needs to be because of exactly this narrative, and noticing how that patterning is the very thing that, again, it will work to a certain degree, but it starts to create a ceiling and a cap because you can only work yourself so far. And a lot of times what that means is we're just not as efficient as we could be because we are just creating more effort in something that doesn't need more effort to generate the results you want. Hopefully that part makes sense, but if not, let me know. And if you have a question around that. I think there was another piece I wanted to share in this, but I'm just going to check and see where I can see the comments. Okay, no questions. Water. The other piece here that I wanted to speak to kind of wrapped up all around this. So we talked a little bit about finding the contentedness, the joy, the playfulness, and seeing how that you can leverage that and you can leverage that and bring that into the same strategy that can feel hard. I think this is where it can be very confusing if we don't hear the nuance, to hear someone say, I'm having my fun era, I'm having my easeful era in business, and then that's like, well, what the F does that actually mean? And I want to talk a little bit about the truth behind that, and then also speak a little bit to what this means in terms of the path of least resistance for your results. But I think just, again, what I put in the email here, and I think what's just helpful maybe to illustrate, and what I was saying a little bit earlier is, this doesn't mean that I'm not showing up for work, and it feels very easeful and playful and light and joyful for me. I feel very content because I'm in alignment and because I've gotten very clear on the business model I want and the work I want and the clients I love to work with, and I've really gotten practice at keeping my eyes on my own paper and not getting wrapped up in what so-and-so is doing and thinking I should be chasing something else, because I'm very clear on what my version of success, I know that sounds so fucking cheesy, but truly, like, I'm very clear on what fills me up, what my non-traditional, I call it my happy little life, but like what that looks like for me and my husband and for our life. And so that for me then feels very joyful and easy to show up for, because I'm showing up for all the things I want to. And what I show up for every day to someone else who has a very different version of success, who has very different business goals, who has very different monetary needs, who maybe has kids at home, or who maybe hates one-on-one, or who doesn't want to have a partner who's in the arts and pursuing acting, right? There's so many nuances there, but who has just a very different picture for what that looks like, might look at how I show up every day and think, oh my gosh, that that sounds miserable. That would make me so unhappy, and or that looks hard as fuck, because anything that's out of alignment is going to feel very arduous. It's just going to feel like more effort. And I think this is where alignment is such a funky word, I think, in our space, that gets misused as well. And this is not, again, to make an excuse for, and this doesn't mean there won't be things that feel hard in your business or there won't be challenges to overcome. I had 3 big challenges last week to navigate. And overall, I would say my life, my business feels super easeful and super content. And within that, there are still challenges and still hard things I'm showing up for. And I'm still showing up for quite a lot in my life and business. They just happen to be the things I want to show up for. And they happen to be the things that I know how to bring levity and play to and hold them in a way that feels very joyful. And then for someone else, that would feel very hard. And so I think the invitation for you is to look at what alignment actually means, and not to use that as an excuse to not show up for things. You're like, ugh, I don't like this thing, or this doesn't feel good, or I don't want to do this thing, and so it's out of alignment, because I think that's where alignment can get us a little fucked in business. And instead to look at that to really mean more alignment towards your big picture goals, towards your values, and to this is like life coaching 101. And I think sometimes we throw that stuff out the window. Like, what are your core values as a human that you want and for your business? And coming back to those pieces, as well as how you want to run your business, how you want to show up in marketing, how you want to serve clients. And again, these are basic things that everyone knows, but I think we can lose sight of them sometimes, and to see that as the alignment piece. When you have that alignment, that's also going to cause or create the path of least resistance, right? If you're showing up for marketing in the way that you most like to show up for marketing, if you most like to record podcasts, and you record podcasts instead of forcing yourself to write long blog posts and to pin on Pinterest because someone told you have to do that and you like hate that shit, right? That path of least resistance means you're going to have a more easeful time showing up for it. It's going to feel really aligned. It's going to feel really joyful and fun and playful. And there might be hard moments within that, but that's going to make it feel easy to show up for and to do so consistently to get those results. I know this isn't rocket science, but again, I think these are things we just sometimes lose sight of because there's just a lot online. And that's the nuance there when I'm saying my business feels so easeful and I'm in an era of contentedness. Those are the reasons why, and I'm very aware that there are many people who would step into my business and step into my life and think, this is awful, or this feels super hard, because it's not in alignment, and not in alignment meaning to your version of success or to your values as a human and in your business, and vice versa. There are plenty of people I know who have what might on paper seem like an easier, more flowy business, and I know if I were to step into their business, I would be miserable because it wouldn't feel in alignment for me and my values and what really lights me up and what feels really easeful for me. And so I hope that can just be a helpful reminder, because I think otherwise we just hear words easeful, content, playful, or don't just hustle harder to get results. And I think that can be very confusing. And really, I think what's underneath that is seeing the alignment to values and the alignment to your path of least resistance. And again, what we're talking about, path of least resistance, there is going to be, generally speaking, the things that are aligned to your values, the ways you like to show up, the ways that are speaking to, that meet your bigger picture goals. I love using fitness as an example, but if we can use working out as an example. There are lots and lots of ways to reach a fitness goal. What is going to feel, in air quotes, easy for you and help you to feel joyful to reach your fitness goals or your health goals is finding what is in alignment to your values and the way you most like to show up in that path of least resistance. And if the path of least resistance for you is to go for a long walk, that's going to feel easeful and joyful, right? Like, that's going to be the easiest way to create fitness. If you're someone who's like, I would be bored out of my mind. I mean, I personally don't know how anyone could be bored walking. I love walking more than anything. But, if you're like, I would be bored out of my mind, and like, what really is in alignment for my values and what lights me up and what feels like my path of least resistance is to be in a group class lifting kettlebells, or I don't know what other classes do, right? Like, that's going to be your path of least resistance. And to someone else, that would look super hard. To you, well, it might be a challenging class. It's going to feel very easeful to show up for and joyful to show up for to be able to get the results on the other side. Hopefully that nuance makes sense for y'all. I'm just seeing, because there was one other thing that I promised y'all I would share here, and I have a lot of notes around this. Okay, the last piece I wanted to play here, because I think this is something that I find with this whole, we're talking about the mindset that supports attraction, booking clients, making money. This is something that I personally, again, making that shift that I've seen really support me and that I've seen support clients. And it's been coming up a lot recently, and I don't know if that's just a season my clients are in, or if it's a reflection of the economy or what's going on in our industry or in our space. Y'all will have to let me know as you're listening now and on the replay. But what I'm finding as well, and just a nuance to understanding this mindset shift and leaning into what is that easeful, playful way to show up for even the things that might be hard for you to do, and getting out of that hard work equals results mentality, and understanding that's different than things feeling hard, is noticing two core pieces here. What I'm really noticing for the people who have that like high achieving hard work mentality is there's a really, it just seems bigger right now than it has in the past. I'm seeing that also very much get into a doing things right, sort of like a perfectionism, but doing things right and really looking at metrics in a way that is being, I would say, almost weaponized against yourself, and as it's almost like become the new way to like push yourself to work harder. And we talked about this on one of the past live streams, so I won't go too much into this, but I just want to invite you to think about and to notice if this is coming up for you, because I know a lot of people in this group are high achievers, and I know whether or not you're a high achiever, you might have the mindset patterns that like to give yourself a hard time, that you might not feel like you're good enough or doing enough, or where you like to make yourself wrong, or where you get into comparisonitis, or all of the very, very normal things that the brain can do. And what I find, especially if, again, you just feel like hard work equals results, and I have to work harder to get results. And maybe this is a bit of a byproduct of, I think, economy / industry, where we're talking about one of the past live streams, where we're just seeing longer customer journeys. And I think that would actually be a very logical conclusion to make. Again, what I'm just seeing is very smart people who really know how to work through their mindset. The brain is just very sneaky, and if this is a safety mechanism, if this is a way where like your brain is like, I've created safety through knowing if I work harder, then I will get results, then I am safe, and I'm not getting the results I want, therefore I must work harder, and I don't know how to work harder. What I think it can easily do is start to get really granular with metrics, and to, again, use those against yourself to make yourself very, very wrong. And I think that's just a place to really be mindful and to check in with. And we talked about this on the other classes, or not classes, these aren't classes, live streams. I would really invite you to check in with, when you're taking a look at things like your metrics, and when you're taking a look at strategy or action or what you're going to show up for, from the lens we're talking about here, just to check in with, are you at a neutral lens? I think metrics, data, so fucking important, right? Every business needs that, but it's very different to look at those neutrally and to use those to either support your mindset or to support your next strategy step or to support a decision, versus feeling like you're not getting results, feeling insecure, feeling not safe, feeling not good enough, and going to what is the place I can, from that lens, go to validate the story I'm telling about myself that is going to just validate, see, I need to work and push harder because this isn't working. I would just be very, very mindful of that, because I think that is a place in which we can just very easily, psych major here. What is one of the classes you take in psychology? Statistics. What does statistics teach you? Statistics teaches you that you can pretty much manipulate numbers to tell yourself any story. I mean, it is wild. This is why you always want to be very careful when you're looking at research from a study, that numbers can be manipulated very, very, very easily, right? And there are statistical formulas. If you run a research, right, like there's these different stat formulas, and I've seen people do this, where it's like, well, this statistical formula doesn't give me the answer I want, so let's run a different one to give me the answer I want. I'd be very, very mindful of, if you have the mentality of I have to work harder and harder and harder to get results and I'm not working hard enough, and that is kind of like the place I grasp onto for safety. If you're looking at numbers through that lens or metrics through that lens, I would just be very mindful that you're not then creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're looking for the story in your numbers to affirm, to confirm that story for yourself. Because again, we can tell a lot of different stories with the same data points, even if you're not running them through statistics. And so that's just something I've just noticed more, and I would just say just checking in with that. And I think this is again where, I mean, a neutral mindset is a whole other mindset shift that I think is very powerful, but I think just noticing where that's coming up for you. And even there, what I might say is, what would it look like to look at those same metrics, and instead of weaponizing them against yourself, what would it look like to hold them more lightly? What would it look like to be more playful with them? Like, I know like metrics and data doesn't seem like a really fun thing, but also like, what's the fun thing you could play with this here? Because if I think about business and testing and what business really is, where it's like we have a hypothesis and we test something and then we get data back, right? Like that testing experimenting is a more light, playful way to look at something versus like pass, fail, right, wrong, work harder, not harder. And I think that can be a way to bring a lot more ease with what you're looking at in your business. So I won't go too far down a rabbit hole there, but that was something I wanted to speak to. I've just been seeing a lot more of that. And I think sometimes, depending on what's going on in our world or in our industry, certain mindsets and certain fears that are already present can get heightened. So something I would offer there, because I think it's tied in with what we're talking about today. And then on the other side of that, what I would say you can also play with is also seeing where are your opportunities to take this whole idea of, okay, so if I'm going to hold things a little more lightly, if I'm seeing like, yes, I need to show up for my business, I still like the work itself might look the same in terms of like, you're still going to show up to serve clients, you're still going to show up to market, you're still going to show up to sell. And also, how can I bring more joy and more contentness and more ease to that? I think within that, what the fun thing to play with, and I think this also ties into like looking at metrics and data, is playing with how can you also, I feel like this is like a whole other conversation. Maybe we'll do it. I've done a masterclass on this before, so maybe we'll do one of these coming up. But how can you really look at playing with the mindset of, wait, if that's all true, and if I know the path of least resistance, and I know showing up with that type of energy and that type of mindset is going to change my approach, and that's going to change my point of attraction, like what would it look like for me to really take the mentality of I get to make my own rules in business, and like what would that even mean for me? Because again, if we're going back to like the getting so wrapped around the hard work, grind it out, or like using metrics as like a weapon against yourself, I think that also tends to come from a very strict rule set mentality in terms of I have to do these things in a certain way or I'm going to fail or I'm not going to be safe, or like it's like pass fail mentality, as opposed to, again, what if we hold things a little more lightly? What if we like go back to the idea that entrepreneurship, being a CEO, means you're making something out of nothing, it means there are no effing rules. There are foundations, there are strategies, there are principles that are tested and tried, right? There are things you can learn from. There are certain principles that absolutely are going to make business easier. And within that, like the rule set is something you get to really discern and play with yourself. This is not one board game with one set of rules. This is, we're playing a business game, and you get to like really decide what that rule set is for you. And so that might just be a fun way to take a look at some of the same things you don't have to, but that we're all showing up for. I think sometimes that can be a way to take some of that power back, where sometimes we give it away to like gotta work hard in someone else's rule, and like take it back and see like what would that look like for yourself. I think this is that piece right there is also where really innovative ideas come from. I think that's where like that's when you don't have to push and hustle harder, but you like get that download and you're like, oh my gosh, I just thought of a brilliant business model. I just thought of a brilliant piece of content. I just thought of who I want to reach out to and how I'm going to reach out to them. I think that just opens up a completely different door to opportunity than when you're just making yourself wrong and trying to figure out how you can push yourself a little harder. I'd so much rather you play with, okay, if we're going to play with pushing ourselves, how can you push yourself to like see where are those openings to make some of your own rules? I have so many notes here. I clearly had a lot I want to say on this. Okay, the last I'm going to say it because we're totally at time here, and we'll do another conversation if this is something people want to hear about on the rules. But the last piece I wanted to offer here, I'm trying to think of like how I want to phrase this. Just in terms of the mindset that's, because what the conversation here about today is the mindset that supports attraction, booking clients, and making money, and bringing it back to the very beginning of the conversation and the levity and the fun and the playfulness. And again, playfulness doesn't have to be like you're popping bottles of champagne online or like jumping out of streamers. I think we get that terminology confused, but more of that like levity. The word that comes to mind for me is swagger, and I think there's something within that word when we think about swagger that is a form of confidence, but it's a form of confidence that is that's just giving a few less fucks as a lack of a better way to say it. And I think that really is what we're talking about so much through this whole conversation when we're talking about looking at, you know, your version of success, looking at what are your values, looking at what's the path of least resistance for the way you're going to show up, looking at data and metrics and not weaponizing them against yourself, looking at, yes, of course, we're going to show up to put out effort, but we don't have to make things harder than they need to be or overthink things. When we like boil this all down together, and it's like, what is that it factor that takes someone's business where someone's doing something technically right, and it goes from technically right to like, what just happened? They just blew up. They just went from like kind of getting a couple clients to now being on track for $1 million year or their first 6-figure year or whatever that is. I think that is, I know it's a little bit of an intangible, but I think that is exactly what we're talking about is it's swagger and playing with like, and I mean that in like a very fun way again, where it's like, if you're thinking about your CEO identity, if you're thinking about what that means, where maybe along the way have you lost some of your swagger because you've gotten in your head, or because there's some insecurities coming through, or because there's some fear creeping in. And my guess is for all of you, and swagger is going to mean something different for everyone, right? Everyone's got a different swagger. That's what I like about it. Swagger, it's like we've all got our own style for swagger. Where have you maybe unintentionally given some of your swagger away because you're worrying too much about someone else's rules or the right way to do it or what someone else thinks, right? Giving too many fucks about these external circumstances. Where can you bring some of that back? Because my guess is everyone at some point had that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have started your business in the first place. And then, you know, it's almost like the more you know, sometimes like the more detrimental that can be. Sometimes there's so many clients I have who are further along in business, and one of the first conversations we usually have is like, our work together is to help them unlearn so much of what they've been taught, because it's almost like getting them in their own way. And I think sometimes the online space can do that, right? Where it's like you come in with all this swagger and then it's almost like you learn too much, and that can like dampen it down a little bit. That's the piece I would really, like, that's the potency in your business. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here. So that could be a whole another conversation, but I think that's a nice way to tie this up in a bow, and this conversation in a bow is something to think about. And what I think is a really fun, using the fun, playful, like a fun, playful mindset that also I think gives you something to anchor into that is, I think, a little different from, I'm going to sound like I'm hating. I'm totally not hating on manifesting. I love manifesting, but I just don't love toxic positivity. And I think what we want to be mindful of is not trying to get wrapped around like you have to be super, super positive or you're not going to get results in your business. Instead, what I would play with is, what's the way I can step more into my swagger, own more of my swagger, bring some more levity, like bring some more playfulness make my own rules, give some less, give fewer fucks, right? Like that swagger piece there, I think it's still a, I guess positive in air quotes, energy or mindset, but I think it's one in which you can have swagger and still navigate something challenging. You can have swagger and still navigate something that's hard. You can have swagger and still have to show up for things that to anyone else might look like hard work, but to you feels like fun work because you're showing up in a very different way to approach that work. All right, so that's my stuff for you all. If anyone watching the replay has a question for me, drop it for me. A reminder for you before I hop off, and I'm gonna go then do some of my fun stuff after this. I'm going to my spin class. I always do that after our conversations on Tuesday. But a reminder that if you want to sign up for Sellout Without Feeling Like a Sellout, my 6-week sales course, you can grab free access until this Friday, June 30th. I will drop a link for that. Again, that walks you through the clarity, mindset, strategy, and action of creating a sales process. I walk you through literally like some of those mindset pieces and what has you maybe think sales are yucky and icky, and ways to frame sales so that you really can see it through the lens of service and transformation. And then it's going to walk you through the practicals in terms of how to get visible and how to show up in a way so people understand why you are the best option offer for them, and then walking through some of those really practical elements of sales, like hosting a sales conversation, navigating objections, not overcoming objections. We're not pushing or convincing people, but navigating those, why that's important to do, having some follow-ups, and really being able to close out the back end of your sales process. So we're not just like throwing out offers, we know how to actually bring in a right fit lead and a right fit client. So if you want to join me for that, completely free through this Friday, and then it will turn back into a paid course. And then a reminder, next week is the 4th of July. So here in the US, that is a holiday. So I will not be live because I'm just assuming most of you will not be here. And I will pick these lives up the week afterwards. So we'll have a conversation then for you. And if you commented live, we will make sure we get you hooked up with Get Unstuck, Unlock Your Success. Love you all so much, and I'll see you in 2 weeks instead of 1. Bye.